You're watching Caucasus Now. I'm Orkun Amashov. The House of Caucasus, a regional cooperation model comprising Azerbaijan, Armenia and Georgia, is not just a mere possibility, but perhaps, in many respects, an absolute inevitability. Baku and Tbilisi over the past few decades have created a regional connectivity agenda, acting as reciprocal enablers in relation to each other. Armenia could have been part of this architecture, but it isn't due to the continuing absence of peace and normalization with Azerbaijan. Well, what could be done now? Let's try to understand.
The South Caucasus, a region dominated by external powers for many centuries, lacking the agency for sovereignty, is now comprised of three independent nations. More than 3 decades after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, which saw Azerbaijan, Armenia and Georgia regain their independence, the region has found itself in a position that has a promise of geopolitical autonomy, with greater role on the international stage. The perceived self-interest of the local regional actors mandates the creation of what is colloquially referred to as the House of Caucasus, a highly integrated, stable and economically prosperous regional framework of cooperation as an absolute must. With a number of stumbling blocks remaining ahead, such as the continuing absence of a long-awaited peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and wider disagreements on the nature and modus operandi for unlocking the web of regional communications lines involving these countries, the cornerstone of what is to become a regional integration could be deemed as having been established. Over the past 3 decades, Azerbaijan and Georgia have established a connectivity infrastructure comprised of vital regional projects such as the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway, oil and gas pipelines, laying the foundations for economic interdependence. This infrastructure is also essential to the Middle Corridor project connecting Central Asia with Europe. In 2025, with Baku and Yerevan having finalised the negotiations on the text of a draft peace agreement and Georgia offering itself as a platform for dialogue. Now there is a possibility that Armenia could also join this partnership model as the third pillar of the House of Caucasus. On 17th April, deputy foreign ministers of these 3 countries met in Tbilisi in what is described as the first trilateral meeting between them, marking a historic milestone. Whilst acknowledging the untapped potential of cooperation based on full respect for each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity, the parties explored the prospects of trilateral cooperation across the areas of common interest. With the obstacles hindering the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace deal remaining unresolved, there is a question if Baku and Yerevan could still work on the connectivity agenda and whether a trilateral cooperation of the 3 Caucasian nations could qualitatively change regional dynamics via a wide range of confidence-building measures.
Joining me today to understand this very subject and the prospects of the regional cooperation in the South Caucasus, nitty-gritty elements and latest developments related to Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process are Boris Novosaryan, political analyst, Yerevan, Armenia; George Mchelishvili, associate professor, European University, Tbilisi, Georgia; and Ahmad Alili, director of the Caucasus Policy Analysis Center, Baku, Azerbaijan. Well, welcome to all of you.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you very much indeed for joining. Today we're going to discuss the prospects of regional cooperation and also Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process in particular. I would like to pose my first question to Boris. This latest meeting involving deputy foreign ministers on the 17th of April took place against the backdrop of important developments. A draft text of a peace agreement has been finalized. That 17 provision agreement is done, but the circumstances conducive to the signature are not there yet, according to Azerbaijani point of view. And also, Georgia is sort of emerging as a platform for dialogue between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Many people say that this trilateral format between these 3 countries should have been established a long time ago, and it's sort of belated. What is your reading of what just happened very recently?
The very idea of Caucasus House could be realized only in the case if the 3 countries find common value in this and common benefits from this. And that is why I think the reality that the text of the peace agreement is in fact finalized This means that we have to keep us as far as possible from symbolic things that still divide Armenia and Azerbaijan. And let us focus on practical things like connectivity, for instance, which is in favor of all nations of this region. And I am strongly against the idea that any transport communication lines possibly crossing Armenia will somehow damage the role of Georgia in the region as an important hub for international trade. I think the more transport routes we have in this region, the more the others are valued by the international community and the traders. That is why I see a lot of common interest in focusing now on connectivity, and as I said, leave away all the symbolic circumstances that are creating obstacles for the peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Ahmad, we understand that for this proper integration model to exist, Azerbaijan and Armenia should have normal relations. There must be peace treaty, connectivity agenda should be properly implemented. But still, before the deal is signed, and it is not going to be signed, I imagine, too soon, probably, do you think still there could be a very good case for regional summit involving these countries in the same way Central Asian countries have evolved over the past few years? They got many divisions, they disagree about border issues. Recently they sorted out some of their border issues, but still it's possible to discuss and come together. Do you see the value and merit in having a regional summit, even at the highest level, involving these three countries?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that in this case, South Caucasus is far behind Central Asian nations. Central Asian nations for the last 30 years, they found a formula to get integrated, to build certain regional platforms, although there were nations who also had certain territorial problems, disputes. But I believe that in this case, we can catch very fast. And we are doing that. What happened yesterday was the meeting of the three deputy MFAs. This is quite a nice example of it. And I believe that I'm very happy to see that deputy MFAs. So it's enough high political level, but also these are the people who can discuss on certain technical issues. So it's a real platform where you can discuss and find understanding on so many issues, and then take it to the upper level and then make sure that there is a certain results on the regional integration. So let's see that if there is a continuation of this platform. I believe it's going to be a very important step if parties decide that it should be they should hold similar meetings on a regular basis, and I hope that the future meetings are going to take place in Azerbaijan and Armenia also. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be this platform is going to help to break down certain walls in the region, that Armenians can travel to Azerbaijan, Azerbaijans can travel to Armenia, and as a result we can build a certain positive environment for the regional integration. But of course, in the future, I expect that at the summit of the South Caucasus countries' leaders, it's going to be a very effective one. And also I expect that, in case of Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process, Armenian and Azerbaijan officials reached that they are going to recognize each other's territorial integrity. They declared it several times, and I believe that that document, the text is agreed, that has very important points on this issue. But it would be quite a positive development that we all realize that together with the Central Asian nations, South Caucasus is European, that the principle of the territorial integrity, this is the very important issue right now for the wider region. And I believe that signing a document or a declaration that making that position very clear can help can fasten building regional integration projects much faster.
George, I think that declaration that was issued after that meeting specifically mentions collaboration on the basis of mutual recognition of territorial integrity and sovereignty. How important is it for Georgia to be a platform for these two countries to come together? And does it increase the meaning of the word regional self-ownership or just regional ownership that we use quite often these days?
Indeed, yesterday's meeting was very important. I am glad that Georgia finally developing its law as a platform. Well, it cannot be anything bigger because Georgia is a small country of 4 million. It hardly can any incentive for Armenia, Azerbaijan actually to cooperate. Therefore, no carrots in this regard, but the big will to be part of the genuine South Caucasus region, which stands to benefit a lot because the dividends of the potential regionality of our area are enormous. So we see the example of the Baltic states, we see the example of the Visegrad countries in Central Europe. You know, when they put their differences like aside on the back burner, so they stand to benefit because they have a common goal. Now, the common strategic goal is turned into a peaceful region, which could serve, and very importantly, between East and West, also in the neighborhood of the Middle East, European neighborhood. So there are many, I would say, strategic dimensions where the region could play a role, and I really kind of welcome the yesterday meeting. Well, unfortunately, so Georgia itself, starting from the early 90s, started to suffer from Russian perfidies in the first place. So therefore, we could hardly. There were no any place, no, I would say no financial, no economic, no political wherewithal for Georgia to play any significant role in the interaction between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But so together with Azerbaijan and Turkey, Georgia formed a important corridor, which first of all ensured this in the energy independence of the significant part of the South Caucasus. Then transportation corridors developed, and we have set a very good example. And of course, if Armenia joins these infrastructure and connectivity projects, of course, it will be really nice. Obviously, we understand understand that there are still hurdles. There are some important issues, the points which could cause potential friction, but I think several important bricks have been laid, and there is a dynamic and there is an impetus which should be continued.
Boris, we understand that, of course, regional cooperation, some nice words could be expressed and some brilliant ideas could be articulated, but it's all effectively, in our case, contingent upon Azerbaijani-Armenian normalization. Recently in Antalya, during that trilateral panel, when 3 ministers were present on that panel, Armenian Foreign Minister Arat Mirzayan posed this open question. He said that, do we have a conflict, he said, and he said, on the ground, we don't have a conflict, but because we don't have a peace agreement, perhaps we do have some form of conflict. And then Prime Minister Pashinyan, whilst addressing the parliament and talking about the OSCE Minsk Group and its dissolution, said that OSCE Minsk Group, at least de facto, operates within a broader context, he said. And he said that Armenia wants to be certain that Azerbaijan does not view this group's dissolution as a means to end the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict within Azerbaijani territory and shift it into Armenia's sovereign territory. That's what Prime Minister Pashinyan said. It would be very nice to hear your reflections on this particular statement of Armenian Prime Minister.
First of all, I want to say that under the current global developments and global situation, even the countries like our three in the region are enough independent not to be under influence of any third players if they want to resolve a problem between themselves and if this will is consistent. That is why talking so much about Minsk Group or other possible players, we, I think, exaggerate the obstacles that exist between us to establish peace. Because if we are talking about specifically Minsk Group, then already since, I think, late 1990s, this group became something like a consultant rather than a body that resolves any problems, like it was in early 1990s. And that is why I would mention this group as one of the symbols that are preventing constructive dialogue between Baku and Armenia. And still, these third parties, be it Minsk Group, be it Zimbabwe, or be it someone else, I think should be considered as someone who can bring just good advice. And if this advice is not acceptable for Yerevan and Baku, they are free to reject it. That is why putting this symbolism, like Minsk Group, is something that is creating a situation when Armenia has territorial claims toward Azerbaijan. I don't think it reflects nowadays reality. Again, to my assessment, Minsk Group is dead. And now putting this kind of preconditions for a peace agreement or any other preconditions that are still on the table, some of them Armenia accepted as 2 points of the text of the peace agreement. This is not the right tactic because it burdens the process and spoils some internal developments in the countries. And I think this is what Mr. Pashinyan wanted to say, because the more symbolism, the more historical precedents you bring to the table, the more sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country is perceived, at least in Armenia, as something not secured during the process. And one of these reasons, and this was reflected also during the panel discussion in Antalya Forum, was Armenian constitution, which I don't want to talk long, but has indeed no constitutional norm that creates any territorial claims Armenian. But still, if we are listening official Yerevan, it is ready to start any process to resolve this issue as well. But we have to understand that the constitution and its content is not decided by the government. It is decided by the voting of the people. And that is why putting it as a precondition for negotiations between officials, I don't think this is the right thing to do now. And especially that, again, I could bring at least 15 examples that there is no constitutional norm in the constitution of Armenia that creates any problem between Armenia and Azerbaijan, apart of some symbolic and emotional perceptions. And there is no example of the practicing Armenian constitution that creates any doubts in that. And I want to say to many Azerbaijani experts who are bringing the example of Robert Kocharan being a candidate for presidency in 1998 and saying that the Constitutional Court of Armenia approved his right to be a candidate. No such Constitutional Court decision exists. And I don't know where from Azerbaijani experts are taking this example. Because Robert Kocharan was registered candidate for presidency because he got a certificate from Armenian police that he has a residence qualification living in Yerevan for the last 10 years before the election period. So this was the reason why he was registered as a candidate. So let us be as realistic in our approaches, and this will bring us to better situation in terms of concord in the issues still existing between Baku and Yerevan.
Well, thank you very much, Boris, for your answer. Actually, the reason why I asked that question earlier was down to that key sensibility revolving around Armenia thinking that Azerbaijan wants to move the epicenter of the conflict from its own sovereign territory to Armenian territory. But we'll come back to that a bit later. Ahmed, I would like to hear your thoughts on what Boris has just said.
Yeah, I believe it's very important that there is a mutual understanding in Baku and Yerevan that OSCE Minsk Group is not a useful tool anymore. The OSCE Minsk Group was built in 1992. The international environment was completely different back then, and we are living in a basically, after 2008, after 2014, and after 2000. The region, I'm not talking about the international relations, but I'm talking post-Soviet area, it changed significantly, right? So that is why those international instruments that were created in the early 1992, there is no use of them. That's for 1% sure. But from time to time we are hearing for example, Russian ambassador to Armenia, he once, last month, he recalled OSCE Minsk Group and the role it played in the past. So it looks like there is Russia is looking for certain platform to do cooperation with United States, and the OSCE Minsk Group is notorious for that, because OSCE Minsk Group was not a group that was fully working for the resolution of Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process. OSCE Minsk Group also was a platform where that Americans, French, and Russian diplomats could cooperate. Right, this was one of those platforms. So there is with the Donald Trump administration and in Oval Office and the negotiation process taking place with Russians, it seems that there are certain hopes that these kind of platforms might come back. So that is why I believe that Azerbaijan and Armenia should work together to make sure that there is no such case in the future. Also, Baku is quite worried that there is an international actor approaching Armenia and promising certain issues. Armenia can side with that international actor. In this case, Azerbaijan, there is quite a strong belief in Azerbaijani expert community that Armenia's position on Zengezur southern corridor would be different, if not Iranian position. So Iran's position, Iran's hard stance on this issue kind of helps Yerevan to make its position harder on this issue also, right? So can in the future any international player approach Armenia and promise something, and then that's going to change the regional cooperation format? So this is a very important issue for Azerbaijan also. And regarding the Robert Kocheryan case, I believe, that there might be certain issues, the technical details, but for Azerbaijan, this is very important that there are certain loopholes, and Armenian judicial system, Armenian politicians, Armenian other branches of the power, they are using these loopholes, and from time to time they are providing completely different interpretation on the same case. That's what worries Azerbaijan. So that is why Azerbaijan is looking for a bulletproof document that cannot be interpreted in the future in any other way. So that is why for Azerbaijan, there are two loopholes in this case: legal loopholes and political loopholes. The legal loopholes for Azerbaijan, it derives from the Armenian constitution. The political loopholes, the source of it is OSCE Minsk Group. And we discussed why OSCE Minsk Group is dead. It's no more relevant issue. But also I believe that Baku and Yerevan can also reach the conclusion on this issue on constitution. And I believe that the recent statements by Mr. Pashinyan create certain hopes in Azerbaijan also. But for sure, his completely different reading of the statement, when he basically changed the meaning of that article completely, that sends message to Azerbaijan that Prime Minister Pashinyan from time to time can misread or read in a coupled manner even the document he signed fully. That is why Azerbaijan wants to all of the possible loopholes, political, legal, and to make sure that the document that's going to be signed is going to be relevant for a long time. But in this context, it doesn't matter. It's going to be signed before end of the war in Ukraine or after. Because even if the war in Ukraine ends, some external powers might come to the region, and then after they can even make sure that Armenian interpretation of the document is completely different from Azerbaijan's position.
Well, interpretations always differ. In the case of Azerbaijan and Armenia in particular, we still disagree on Article 9 of 10 November Declaration. There are some big questions whether actually 10 November Declaration is still in force or not. Armenian experts and officials have a completely different view about that. And we'll come back to those things. I mean, what we're trying to do here, which is we found ourselves within the confines of a very complex structure, relatively complex structure. We shouldn't overcomplicate it. In one way, in one respect, we're discussing Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process with all Azerbaijani-Armenian nitty-gritty details about constitution, OSCE, Minsk group claims, counterclaims, which is important. And also we have a distinguished Georgian expert who is actually helping us understand wider Caucasian landscape. George, we take it for granted, without thinking perhaps too much, that Georgia will benefit from Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process. It will lay the foundations of what we call House of Caucasus. But there are those who believe that actually, yes, Azerbaijan and Georgia have created this infrastructure, which is essential part of Middle Corridor, no doubt about that. These two countries need each other. They're acting as reciprocal enablers. But Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process will decrease the vital significance of Georgia as a vital connector between Azerbaijan and Turkey. There are those who say this, and there are quite a number of those, in particular in Russia. What do you make of that argument?
Well, in the first place, it's a really very interesting dialogue, like debate between Armenian and Azerbaijani expert, and again, time frame and the format doesn't allow me actually to educate and like to express my opinions. But well, thank you for asking me a question about Georgia, about the role of my country. No surprise that Russia again tries to find a rift to create actually some divisive points between the countries, trying to send some black cats and to create some bad blood between countries. It hasn't been the first case of that. Middle Corridor, talking about the potential of the region, I believe, and has been confirmed by some like economists and like the expert in this in the relevant fields, the potential volume of trade between East and West, so like China and extended like Central Asia and Europe, will be sufficient for this infrastructure, like to everyone will have their actually role. I believe that right now the throughput of the corridor should be increased, so several fold, in order to digest all the trades, all the routes, and all the trade that will be existing when the middle corridor will be operational. So I believe that there is no doubt that infrastructure should be developed further, and it will be enough space for every country. Whereas we see attempt on the part of the Russian Federation, and it brings me to the other issue. There is now a window of opportunity for, in the first place, Armenia, Azerbaijan, to sort out, to iron out the meaningful agreement and leave the conflict behind, because we see that right now Russia is bogged down in Ukraine and cannot act as a spoiler as it used to be acting before, and this might not last forever. That might not last for another year or two. Next year there is crucial election in Yerevan, and as the practice shows, so Russia definitely has as it believes, a stake. It made its political preferences very clear, whom it supports and whom it doesn't support. And the reason it supports certain actors, it doesn't support the other, because the actors which Russia doesn't support want to make Armenia and the region more functional. They want to end this terrible dependency, I wouldn't say dependency of Armenia on that Karabakh conflict, rather than any other dependencies and the other occupation. That's the most important, to free the country mentally, and by doing that, create the ground for the truly functioning region. So I think in this regard, the role with Georgia is important. I also believe that the role of the Western actors, being Brussels, like Washington, well, Washington right now is like too busy elsewhere, but some other important centers, important capitals will be more productive, more even-handed, and will not leave the sense that it is either double standards or unfair game. Minsk group, unfortunately, was a very eloquent case in point, if I may put it this way, because basically it was concerned mostly by keeping the what is believed to be unjust status quo. So now I think actually its days are numbered, and I think it outlived its usefulness. But I believe some other format, like led by Europe and the collective West, could be formed, which will have the strategic thinking, which will understand how important to have South Caucasus as a predictable, stable, so economically prosperous region, or at least region with economic promise, so that it could form a basis of the future peaceful Eurasia.
Well, negotiations are currently bilateral. They've been bilateral since probably October 2023. But Boris, back to the point about this wider conflict, confrontation between Azerbaijan and Armenia. For example, Paul Goebel, former advisor to the US Secretary of State, once said that, Azerbaijan and Armenian clash, in a wider sense of this word, has always been about both Karabakh and what we in Azerbaijan call Zangezur, in Armenia. It's about the rearrangement of territories and so forth. And this corridor thing comes to the equation. Azerbaijan has made it abundantly clear that it's an Armenian territory, we just want a corridor. But the question there is that, we understand that Iran and not in favor of this, Turkey supports Azerbaijani view, but the question is that unimpeded access that Azerbaijan wants to its Nakhchivan exclave. Will Armenia eventually find itself in a position of being sort of compelled to agree to this proposition? What will be the nature of the compromise? Because that territory is Armenian territory, but Azerbaijan should be able to travel from Armenia to Armenia without feeling the sense that it is going through Armenia. These two considerations, could they be together, part of one scope, or they are mutually exclusive?
I think when we focus on the negotiations about this specific issue, which are unfortunately frozen now, different understanding of what is unimpeded access. And from the one hand, you can understand under this formulation that it means that there should not be any artificial obstacles for people and goods to move from continental Azerbaijan to Nakhchivan autonomy. Other understanding of this formulation is that this corridor should be exterritorial. And of course, if we are talking about the status of exterritorial corridor, this will mean immediate problem for Armenian sovereignty. And probably coming back to your previous question, this is one of the things that Nikol Pashinyan might mean, saying that a conflict moved from the territory of Azerbaijan to the territory of Armenia. Another reason for that statement of him, although I am not in a position to interpret what Prime Minister of Armenia is saying, probably he has his own spokesman to do that, was using quite frequently the term of Western Azerbaijan in Azerbaijan political discourse. And this, of course, creates certain concerns within Armenian society. But I think that if the focus of the negotiations from the symbolic issues like Minsk Group, Armenian Constitution, or presence of third countries in the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which I think is not at all an obstacle for peace agreement between Armenia, but in some cases Armenia agrees to to additional compromises in this dialogue, in these negotiations. The main issue is indeed practical things like this road through the territory of southern Armenia. And if these negotiations on this, discussions on this will become constructive and have as a ground the common interest of countries, then I think the solutions will be found and more precise understanding what is unimpeded access will be found. And under this term again, I want to remind that there are small territories of Azerbaijan which are not used anyhow for Azerbaijani economic or other gains, are closed for Armenians to move from Armenia to Armenia. Yeah, and this problem created after the 44 days war. Maybe then Azerbaijan had some reasons to make these limitations because there were concerns that some weaponry or other things are moving through that roads to Nagorno-Karabakh. But now this problem does not exist. And I think we could return back to these issues of unimpeded transportation from Armenia to Armenia using the small part of Azerbaijani territory as it was before the conflict. So I think there is a complex of issues that could ensure mutual understanding and solutions of the problems in favor of both sides. And I think now there is potential for that if, again and again, I will repeat it, if symbolic issues that prevent from coming to consensus will disappear from the negotiation table.
One follow-up question, if I may. You described OSCE Minsk Group issue as being of symbolic nature. I think that the dominant sensibility here in Azerbaijan is that, yeah, it's the organization is de facto not functioning. It has been clinically dead since probably February, March 2022. If Armenia and Azerbaijan together jointly apply for its dissolution, it will mean that Armenia does not have territorial claim towards Azerbaijan. It's just a reiteration of that position of Armenia. Azerbaijan needs for that purpose. Constitutional referendum in Azerbaijani mindset, as far as I can tell, is all about, we are signing this not with the government of Pashinyan, but with the Armenian people. Because if they vote in favor of that referendum proposal, it will mean that we will have this firm foundation for future long-standing durable peace in the region. Assuming that the referendum does not go in a way it should go, what will be the consequence then? I mean, that will take place in late 2026. And I know that the conditions are not not incredibly simplistic. It's not just about yes or no. There's also quota. What if Prime Minister Pashinyan fails to convince Armenian people to vote in that direction? How do you imagine the afterwards? I don't know, maybe it's not a practical question to ask now. We need to focus on positivities and practicables, but still.
Okay, let's start briefly with the Minsk group. I don't think that it is not at all possible or realistic that Armenia and Azerbaijan raise the question about the solution of this Minsk group. Probably this would be a good solution, especially that we know that it is not only in the hands of Armenia and Azerbaijan to do it. Yes. It's decision of all states members of the OSCE. But I mean that this issue of final and formal dissolution of an organization that is dead, as you fairly said, since February 2022, should not be a precondition for the peace. If we remove this issue as kind of precondition and measure of pressuring Armenia, then I think the agreement will be found around this much easier. And it will be much easier to other countries, members of the OSCE, to take this issue seriously. Otherwise, they have some suspicions, they might have some suspicions that this is kind of pressure that put to the risk of some, let's say, sovereign interests of Armenia. The second issue is about the constitution. I promise that I will bring example that the concerns of our Azerbaijani colleagues about the preamble of the constitution has nothing to do with the practical implementation. 14 times in Armenia we had elections or national referendum. I mean, national elections and national referendum. If this provision of the constitution that is in the preamble would practically operate, then there should be a polling station in the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. There were never polling stations in the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh, and if the constitution would provide for as that Karabakh is part of Armenia, according to the declaration, which is another symbolic document, then all elections that took place in Armenia should be characterized as anti-constitutional. Also, the law of Armenia, which was adopted in 2011 on territorial administration of Armenia, it describes the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan exactly as they were during Soviet Union. So this also means that this law would be, which is acting in Armenia without any problems, that this law also should be recognized and anti-constitutional. So I brought a lot of examples, 15 as I promised, that these concerns of Azerbaijani side has no legal ground. So it's purely symbolic, political demand and precondition for Armenians. And the more we will talk about such symbolic obstacles, the more we'll go deep into a lot of natural controversies between Armenia and Azerbaijan, starting from school textbooks and other things. So let us focus, as I promised, to practical issues and not create artificial obstacles for the peace. As to the possible outcome of the Constitution, this raising issue of the preamble of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, in fact, Azerbaijan and some people in Armenia, they are spoiling the process of constitutional reform in Armenia, because it is really needed process. And we never know what would be the reason for any Armenian citizen when he goes to polling station and vote against or in favor of a new version of the Constitution? What would be the motivation of him? The motivation could be because he just dislikes the current government and is against any initiative of this government. And even in previous times, we had such precedent when in 2003, there was constitutional referendum and people rejected this constitutional reform, these amendments. The same could happen, and the main reason was the attitude of the people towards the government. There are many other things that have to be changed in Armenia. We never know what would be, again, the reason of people why they are voting yes or no. That is why, again, if we don't see practical problems, except for some, perceptions, negative perceptions about each other, in the legal documents, we should not take this as a precondition. We have to move as much as possible close to a mutual understanding and avoiding all these traditional stereotypes, negative narratives about each other. But this is not the process that should precede the peace. It should be the process that goes after the normalization of formal relations, official relations between the two states.
Thank you, Boris. Thank you very much indeed for articulating those arguments so elaborately. I think constitution you regard as an artificial sort of obstacle, symbolic obstacle, which is not really that important. There are different views about this subject, of course, in Azerbaijan. Many people would refer to acts which are not constitutional. For example, 1992 act of, let's say, on the 8th of June, according to which. But you say you don't connect it with constitution.
Excuse me, these are different issues.
Yeah, different issues. For example, Armenian government officially applying to International Court of Justice, mentioning the name of the separatist entity. So you're effectively saying that the concern is not about constitution, concern about some other things. We can sort them out in due course. Let's not focus on these things. I perfectly understand that the picture is complex, of course. And by the way, allow me to just mention this before I turn to Ahmad. When that Constitutional Court ruled, I think it was in August or September, about that document on the demarcation commission, argument voiced by lawyers here was that this is not about territorial integrity, it's about the borders, because Armenia always recognized those conditional borders. It was about the status of that territory inside Azerbaijan that was a key problem between Azerbaijan and Armenia, not the actual border issue as such. Ahmed, I'm terribly sorry for this long exchange, and thank you very much, Boris. So grateful to you for your analysis. In Antalya Diplomacy Forum, when Nigar Göksel, acting as a sole respondent to the panel, posed that question to those three foreign ministers of Caucasian nations, said that as these constitutional obstacles persist, amendment issue persists, we can perhaps focus on fixables, solvables, things which can be done now. And she effectively alluded to connectivity agenda. Do you expect practical moves in that direction before we can sign a deal? I mean, Azerbaijan and Armenia can sign a deal.
Yeah, sure, of course. Let me go back to briefly go back to these issues that Boris touched. I believe that we are part of the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan for a long time. And we remember the certain argument that was out there even before September 2020. And most of the time when we, with Armenian colleagues, we would reach a certain understanding on certain issues that this process should be moved on, the Armenian expert community their argument would be that Armenian constitution prohibits Armenian leaders signing any document recognizing Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. So this was the why now Azerbaijan uses this argument, because Armenian expert community representative for a long time, they would cite Armenian constitution and saying that this is the obstacle for signing this type of the document. Armenian constitution prohibits signing moving on with these positive scenarios that we were discussing back then. And also about the deal, I believe that there could be a very positive the chances of signing this deal before November 2024 was much higher than in March 2025. It's the exactly same text, but Armenia did not sign the text in November 2024, did not attend COP29, but agreed the same text in March 2025, right? I would say that the positive time period that existed between 7th December of 2023 up until the November 2024, Azerbaijan was doing, there are certain issues that we were not expecting that Azerbaijan to the future. Azerbaijan did that. For example, the issue of enclaves, the Zengezur corridor issue. So there were agreements that was a clear declaration that science want to move on very in a very speedy manner and sign the peace deal as possible, but then there were certain preconditions. For example, now we are not hearing anything about the Armenians in Azerbaijan prisons, and they should be returned before signing a peace deal. But that was the case before November 2024, right? So we missed already one opportunity, and it's a very, I would say, an unfortunate moment. So how we are going to go back to that positive environment that we had before that. But regarding the concrete and the practical steps regarding Zengezur corridor, I believe yes. The issue is that Azerbaijan builds this, the physical infrastructure, and it should be present. Doesn't matter how Baku and Yerevan will agree on, and what will be the terms of the passengers and the cargo passing over this corridor, but the infrastructure should be present there. So I believe that this is we have to be sure that Armenian side also start the construction alongside this the physical infrastructure and alongside the international border, and this is what we need. Otherwise, if there is no physical infrastructure and the Baku and Yerevan reach agreement on the terms of this the transportation, and then we have to wait for additional 2 or 3 years for the physical infrastructure to be built. So that's the very important issue right now. But the constitution issue, the other issues, I believe that we have to think of on the issues that how to bring back the positive environment was present in between December 2023 and then November 2024. That should be the very first step to do.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ahmad. And George, thank you very much for waiting very patiently, for listening to this very interesting, really, exchange. Wherein actually what we're trying to understand, really, we're trying to hear two different points of view and establish what are the key components there and here, and establish the foundation, the basic contours of a future embryonic compromise, because after all, there must be some element of compromise, irrespective of the balance of power, I suppose. My last question is going to be to you, George. I perfectly understand that this dynamics could be bilateral, but still, from George's perspective, when you look as an not outsider, but sort of a more fair-minded sort of external observer, I use the word external very carefully, I perfectly understand that. We have two competing considerations sort of clashing, maybe not particularly in the case of Boris and Ahmed, but in the case of many Azerbaijani Armenian experts. For example, in Antalya it was very clear. Arat Mirzayan said that not signing the deal now would be crime against humanity. We need to seize this moment. This is otherwise, implications will be too tedious to contemplate. The future generations will not forgive us. I mean, some people are saying that retrospectively we'll be looking back at what's happening now. We could regret that we did not do what we were supposed to do. And there's another consideration, which is the Azerbaijani position, which is that, well, there are certain uncertainties and obstacles. Let's fix them, and they are perfectly fixable. There's not rocket science or brain surgery. And then we will send. Azerbaijan made very clear, fix those issues, we will be ready to sign it. When you look at an external observer, what is your evaluation? I'm not asking you to express whether Azerbaijan or Armenia in this particular case right or wrong, but what is your sense of what is to be done in the context of global development, in particular when you look at it from Georgia's perspective?
Of course, it's like very interesting, I would say, multi-million-dollar question in this regard, given the stakes of the region and the cooperation and potential peace agreement. We see how difficult reconciliation is to achieve. The points which seem irreconcilable. So many contentions, bones of contention, so many issues of discord and different visions. Obviously, this is typical, this is predictable. That's what happens when two neighboring countries have been in conflict and now try to reconcile their difference. Obviously, so much bad blood, well, unfortunately, literally as well, actually, have been spilled. But in this regard, I believe that still the dividend of peace is too big, and it is possible. It's tough as it is possible. My, I would say, concern, and maybe, well, if I may, neighboring, friendly advice, and it is also self-interested, because Georgia, as everyone agrees, tends to win a lot by having this bona fide, genuine region around us and having our friendly countries, neighbors, actually restoring diplomatic ties and leaving this terrible conflict behind them. So again, let me remind me of the time frame. So usually these windows of opportunities, they have tendency not to last forever. So that's why, my genuine advice will be, again, debate, try to iron out, try to, through mutual compromises, mutual understanding, and most importantly, but I think, so of course, symbolism matters only to a certain extent, but I see that this general attitude, positive attitude of of course, they were being diplomatic, but that Bayramov and Mirzayan revealed during the meeting, I saw in them, okay, I really don't want to be mistaken in this regard, the genuine attempt, the genuine desire to reach certain agreement, like to iron it out and to have something tangible within some, say, within a year or two. I don't know actually how much time this opportunity will last. But again, so for me personal, the next year election, like in Armenia, could be an important watershed event. Maybe it is like certain limit. Maybe the other potential limit is this when Russia is untied from this current situation in Ukraine, and very much hope it will be at least approaching like some semblance of fairness and justice, but that's obviously and another issue. So again, so my general idea would be that time is moving, it is running, and there is no time in the world. So I think these issues, however contentious, however difficult that this could be sorted out, the sooner the better.
Thank you very much indeed. Yet indeed, I say that trying to find a simple solution to a relatively complex issue is not right. But when you find that solution appears to be rather simple or less complex than it could have been or you imagined earlier. Well, I'm so grateful to all of you. Thank you very much indeed for your patience and for your contributions. Boris Novosadian, political analyst from Yerevan, George Micheleshvili, Associate Professor of European University, Tbilisi, Georgia, and Ahmad Aleli, Director of the Caucasus Policy Analysis Center, Baku, Azerbaijan. So grateful to all of you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, we discussed the latest trilateral meeting involving Deputy Foreign Ministers of Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, the prospects of a regional cooperation in the South Caucasus, some of the latest developments related to Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process, both related to the text of the deal and also some of the prerequisites which Baku believes are necessary for the deal itself to be signed, connectivity agenda, and some global matters as well. You are watching Caucasus Now, and see you very soon indeed.